Okay. Hello and welcome again, everyone. This is Kate Sanko speaking. I use she, her pronouns. I am the executive director of Teach Access, and I'm joined by a number of my esteemed colleagues and friends here from Teach Access as well. In terms of what we're doing with this information session. So first off, thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. I'm going to give a brief overview of what is Teach Access and kind of a brief history of these faculty grants. Then we'll talk a little bit, we'll hear specifically about the university's task force that's behind the scenes in doing a lot of this work for getting the grants going this year. Judy is going to share more information about that Canvas site that I mentioned, which has more resources there for you. And then seeing where we're at with time, we should have plenty of time for Q&A. So happy to take those questions at that point. If there is a pressing question that you have, please feel free to drop that in the chat and we can address that as we go through. Just in the interest of trying to cut down on any background noise, if there's anyone using a screen reader out there, I ask that you keep chat comments to a minimum if possible, but obviously if there's something that would really help with your understanding of what's going on, please feel free to ask that. We do have ASL interpretation throughout this whole session, as well as CART services, a live captioner. If you do need any assistance with either of those, feel free to direct message myself or Leslie Johnson, whose name is up on the screen as well. You can message her and we can help you out. So with that said, I'm going to pause and see if there's any pressing questions that we can address before we get going from anyone. And if you'd like to speak it, please raise your hand and we can call on you that way. Okay, hearing none, I will proceed, but I'll keep an eye on the chat or if any of my colleagues flag me down to pause. So with that said, what is Teach Access? So perhaps you're familiar with it, perhaps you're not. Either way, you're welcome here. Teach Access, we're a nonprofit organization. We were founded in about 2016 and came out of conversations around what we call the accessibility skills gap. So the idea being companies, industry, specifically the tech industry is where this started, but it's across the board, are looking for recent graduates who know at least a little bit about accessibility and disability. The idea being if they're able to bring in new hires for typical roles that you would see at a company, a UX designer, developer, front-end developer, project manager, project coordinator, a lot of those sorts of roles. If they're able to bring in candidates who know a little bit about accessibility, then they're able to include that from the beginning of a design phase or process. And that's really what we're after, is how do we ensure that more products and services can be what we call, quote, born accessible. So the idea being, rather than it be you get to the end of a product cycle and realize we never talked about it, oh no, it's included from the beginning. For Teach Access, we are about breadth more than depth. And by that, I mean, we aren't looking to create a whole bunch of people who are experts. What we're after is how do we get a lot of people to know a little bit? That's really how we see the work that we're doing having an impact. We will always need people who know a lot about accessibility because there's always going to be really specific challenges, specific use cases, ways to make sure that products and services are working for people. But we're looking at how do we get a lot of people to know the basics so that all of the accessibility experts can focus on those really complicated sorts of questions. So that's what we're after. We also really like to stress this. We are about teaching accessibility more than teaching accessibly. And you'll hear a lot more about that through the grants program conversations we'll have today. But the idea here is that we as Teach Access are spending our time and resources supporting faculty and instructors like all of you who've joined us today, and figuring out how you can teach this in your classroom. We aren't so much talking about how do we make, you know, slide decks accessible? How do we make sure your syllabus is accessible? Obviously, crucially important, and we have to be doing that alongside this. But there are other mechanisms for that. Hopefully, at your institution, there are people that are able to support you in those ways, and there's information out there. We're looking really at how do we help faculty and instructors and teachers teach accessibility in their classes. We aren't looking for, you know, entirely new classes that are just focused on accessibility or minors or majors. That's great if that happens and we know that they exist out there, but we're really looking at how can we infuse this into what's already happening. In doing so, it becomes yet one more thing that our students are learning alongside all the other things they're learning. And it isn't sort of relegated to just, oh, just take this one class over here and then you're done. It just becomes part of the natural progression of learning about how to do design and development. So that's our goal. Our goal is how do we support faculty and instructors in adding this and infusing this into your current curriculum. One of the ways we do that, we have many, but what we're here specifically to talk about today is our faculty grants program. The idea being we're able to award small stipends, and we'll hear more about that in a little bit. But the small stipends are meant to be used for, typically we see, you know, faculty buyout time. So using it as maybe a summer stipend if you aren't working through the summer. We've also seen some people use it maybe for software materials that they would like to use in their classes. But it's really meant to be used to support you in developing curricular materials that you can use in your class. The current cycle, again, we'll get more, you'll hear this again, but the idea is if we can award these to you by the start of this summer, so in the coming months, you'll have those funds available, you can work on this through the summer, and then you're teaching with these materials you create next academic year. This is our fourth cycle. So we're not exactly on a year-to-year schedule. We haven't been, so it hasn't been exactly 4 years, but our fourth cycle. Each year we've awarded somewhere between 10 to 20 awards, different faculty. Anyone who teaches is welcome, whether you're at a 2-year campus, 4-year campus, private, public. The idea is that you are teaching currently. I'm gonna ask if everyone can just mute themselves. I'm hearing some background noise. There we go. Okay, got it. So with that said, we're kicking off this round 4. We're really excited. I'm super excited to hear from my colleagues today. This is the first time we've done an info session like this. So I'm grateful for their support and work in putting this together and really getting a lot more around this information, getting this information out to you some more. I think I will pause there because, yeah, I'll pause there. You'll hear a lot more details about exactly, you know, kind of what this will look like or dates and that sort of stuff from some of the others. But I'm going to pause and I'm happy to answer any questions right now if anyone has them. Or I think up next in the agenda here is our university's task force leads. If there aren't questions, I see Cindy. Cindy, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thanks, Kate. So thanks everyone for being here. My name is Cindy Wiley. I use they, them pronouns. I co-lead the university's task force with Rob Demansky. And our role is to help move along the faculty grants process and also review applications. So we have a process where our task force will review application materials, and it's not like an NSF grant or an NIH grant or, you know, one of the larger grant processes. It's a pretty straightforward, streamlined process. There's a form that you fill out, you explain the module that you are considering adding into your existing course to teach accessibility within your subject matter. So for instance, I teach graphic design and I teach human-computer interaction. And if I add a module into like an intro class per se, then that could be eligible for a faculty grant. If I can explain that in the application process, then our task force will review the applications, and then we have a rubric that we follow, and that goes to the executive committee of Teach Access, and faculty awards are then chosen. So as Kate said, that we are interested in teaching accessibility within your subject matter. And while we are interested in the course materials being accessible, that's not our main focus. We do have the expectation that your course materials will be developed and be accessible following the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Level 2.1. If you have questions about what that means, that's what we're here for. Can reach out to Teach Access. We have some links on the faculty grants page for some materials and resources. Course materials that you do produce as part of your course, not your entire course, but whatever you're producing for the grant, if you are awarded, will be posted to a Teach Access public repository that will be operational by this summer. So as we are growing along in the process, with this being round 4, we will have more widely available materials. So that's one of the understanding of doing the application process if you're awarded a grant. Pre and post testing is also completed as part of the process of student knowledge. So we also like to track that as well. Faculty awardees would be asked to then submit a summary report on their curriculum development, student outcomes, whatever institutional impact has been achieved, and the perceived effectiveness of your presentations, as well as an evaluation of the award project process and its effectiveness, so that we can get better as we go along in this process as well. I'm going to pitch it over to Rob and open up for any questions about the process of review.
Thanks, Cindy. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. Really, for those of you attending this information session, if this could be kind of just a helpful suggestion or piece of advice as you're thinking of what proposals you might want to submit, I could tell you that we are, in addition to everything Cindy mentioned, at a high level, I think the review committee is going to be looking kindly upon scalability and sustainability. So if you're teaching courses that you're looking to revise and incorporate accessibility into, if you're teaching courses that, for instance, not only have a healthy number of students enrolled in a semester, but if it's a course or a course section that gets offered very regularly, like every semester, maybe there's multiple sections of it. At Teach Access, we have this goal of trying to reach 1 million students within 10 years. And so to the extent that this grant would support a course that would be regularly run and reach students really every semester, not just as a one-off, I think that would be looked kindly on. And the second part, as I mentioned, is sustainability. We'd like things that, you know, I think the ideal type of proposal we would see would be one where we would be supporting through this grant your effort in building something a little new. And then even after the grant is over, those new elements, you know, of what you built will continue on even after the funding is over. So again, I think those are the two things that, if I could give you any kind of advice to the extent where it makes sense, scale and likelihood of sustainability. We understand it's difficult to give those types of commitments, but those are two things that I think the review committee will ultimately look kindly upon. And with that said, as Cindy mentioned, maybe we can open it up to any questions that any of you might have just regarding the process or kind of the design of this call for proposals.
And perhaps while people are mulling over their questions, wanted to also just connect us to some other resources that can help you in the process. My name is Judy Cook, and I'm another volunteer, also a member of the university's task force. And together with some other members of the task force, we created a Canvas page that has some additional resources, and perhaps you've already found your way there. But I just wanted to share with you some aspects of that. And I think someone's going to have to give me screen sharing permission. Let's see. Excellent. Did that work? It did. Thank you. Okay. So you should be looking at the Teach Access faculty grants Canvas page, and just wanted to point out some things that could be useful to you when you're trying to put together your own grant. And for me, I love to look at models. It always helps me to see how other people approach something. So if you go over to modules on the Canvas page, one of the modules allows you to hear from previous grant recipients. And those are video summaries of Teach Access grants. And actually, Alyssa Whedon's on this call. So thank you, Alyssa, for contributing your video. Yay. And you can just check those out at your leisure and get an idea of how people approached this work and received the grants in previous years. Another aspect that could be helpful, also under modules, but at a different location, is a link to open source course materials for teaching accessibility. And through this link, you'll find some resources. This is also on the Teach Access page, but just a little quicker way to get to it. You can check out some of those resources. And this is the first time we've created a Canvas page for faculty for this information. So we're starting off baby steps. We did create a discussion area if you wanted to engage with other applicants. We didn't know if this would be a thing, but perhaps you want to just pitch some ideas and exchange information with others to get started on your proposals. But we also have on the homepage a link to feedback on this resource so that we can evolve it for next year so we can make it even better. And one other thing I wanted to mention under the modules is we will be sharing this recording with people if you wanted to come back to it. So I will go ahead and stop the share. And I see a hand up.
Hi, my name is Maria Jose Garcia Vizcaino, and I'm teaching at Montclair State University. I have a question about the Canvas page, which I think is super useful. How can we access that Canvas page to see the successful proposals of other past recipients?
We set it up where you need to register. So if you were on the Teach Access call for proposals or on the Teach Access webpage, there was a link to register. And we're using the free Canvas for Teachers accounts. So it'll prompt you if you don't have a free Canvas for Teachers account to create one, and then you get access to the course. But I'm happy to stay on the call after and go over with you individually if you need some of it. And actually, Kate just posted in the chat the link that'll prompt you through registering. I do recommend once you register that you bookmark it, because if you have multiple Canvas accounts, like maybe your institution uses Canvas, you want to kind of keep it separate because it is a different username, it is a different password. I hope that helps.
Yes, and that's the only way to see the samples of successful applications, right? Through Canvas.
Right, that's the only way to see those videos right now.
Okay, and I have another question, if I may. I'm currently teaching a course on audio description in English and Spanish. It was the first time I implemented that course. So if I understood correctly, these grants are for teaching accessibility. So for example, teaching audio description, in my case, in my department. Like if I want to incorporate new materials to that course, would I be eligible?
You would. Our goal is to try and get it into courses where it isn't already happening. So are there any courses you're teaching where maybe you aren't spending time talking about accessibility or would like to do more than you are
Right.
than in the one you're, those would probably be more likely. I wouldn't say we haven't awarded in the past for courses that already have, some elements of accessibility. So yeah, I know that that's not like a solid answer, but that's where we're at in trying to get this kind of spread of knowledge. We're looking for classes or would prefer classes where it isn't being taught. But certainly it's happened in the past where we've awarded if someone has already. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for those questions.
Mhm.
Like other questions from the group could be about anything general or specific about your applications.
I have a question. Do you see more value towards implementing this in online classes or in-person classes? If I were to choose one of them, I teach both. So
I'm happy to answer this. I think I speak for the group. I think we are delivery mode agnostic. So whatever works, it's a good idea. It's a good idea.
Yeah, and this is Kate speaking. I'd love to build off of that. That's a phenomenal question. Both modalities or all modalities existed before the pandemic and will continue to exist. And so we know that as we're continuing to try and share the materials that come out of this program, we'll need all types, right? So there will be faculty who are teaching in person and are looking for materials that maybe fit well with that sort of modality. Likewise, faculty who are continuing to teach online, who are looking for things maybe suited for that modality. Of course, there's hybrid options, and the case can be made that anything could kind of be adapted to modality. So we don't, seconding what Judy said, there isn't a preference in terms of that. So great question. Thank you for that. Other questions? I'm wondering, Alyssa, if I could put you on the spot a tiny bit, if you'd be willing to kind of introduce yourself and what you did and what the process was like for you, that would be awesome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa. I'm a Caucasian woman in my late 40s. My hair is pulled back, brown hair with some more gray than I'd want to admit, and I'm wearing brown glasses. I'm an associate professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, and I applied last year for the faculty grant. At RIT, we already had some accessibility courses that we offered towards our undergraduate students, but the main thing that I noticed was lacking and the need that I had was the ability to purchase some of the assistive technologies that we talk about as part of accessible design. So those devices, well, some of the software was free, for example, screen reader applications, but then I also requested funds to purchase a refreshable braille display, some switches, some alternative input devices, so that when I'm talking about accessibility and how to design accessible digital content, having the students gain a hands-on experience with using those devices to see how users that may rely on those devices to access the content to have them gain that experience rather than me talking about, hey, users may use a switch, they may use an alternative style keyboard, they may use a refreshable braille display, and potentially Google it or have videos allow them to actually touch, feel, and interact with those devices. So that was the main intent around my particular grant. I found the application process relatively straightforward, and yeah, I'm thankful for the opportunity to receive the funds to be able to help accomplish my educational goals for my courses. So thank you, Teach Access.
Alyssa, can I ask you, how much do things like that cost?
Assistive technologies are very expensive because they tend to be specialized. The refreshable braille display that I purchased, I can look it up, but it was several $100s. And that was on the cheap side. There are refreshable braille displays that go for thousands of dollars. Some of the switches that I purchased were under 100, but I wanted to purchase multiple so that I could structure a class activity whereby students could break up into small groups and then work on an activity that I created around the device. Unfortunately, this year when I had to document my award, recipients have to do a follow-up report. And so unfortunately, the course that the devices were purchased for were offered online. And so my level of student interaction with the devices were limited. But certainly as we resume in-person classes, then I would be able to utilize those devices more. I'm sorry, did that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
okay.
Sorry, I was looking
Yeah.
for the mute button. Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, I'm looking for my spreadsheet now. If I find it, I'll pipe in with some of the costs.
Okay. So I teach right now an online class called Inclusive by Design. It's within recreation, sport, and tourism. And in the class, we look at all identities and everything from facility design, adaptive equipment, communications and marketing, special events and programs, all things that our students might do, whether in recreation, sport, or tourism. And I'm thinking about this around the communications and marketing piece. And I'm wondering if anybody in the group teaches something like that, and if they're thinking something similar. So I'll mute and let anybody talk who's thinking like that.
It's Alyssa. I found my spreadsheet. Again, assistive technologies tend to be very expensive. So I bought a Tobii PCI tracker as an alternative input device where basically an individual would be able to control their computer using their eyes. And that one PCI device cost close to $1,250. So again, that's relatively expensive. I bought some iBill talking money identifiers because I do an activity about the accessibility of currency. And so I purchased multiples of those, and each one individually was $137. My refreshable braille display was about $700. My switches were, they were more expensive than what I thought. My switches were $220 a piece. And so again, it kind of adds up. I also purchased a Glasshouse, GLASSOUSE, wireless Bluetooth wearable hands-free mouse. That was like $587. So again, assistive technologies aren't cheap because they're not necessarily mainstream items.
Thank you.
This is Kate speaking. Robin, I wanted to make sure we didn't miss your question. Just to be clear, you were wondering if others were thinking about teaching accessibility. Could you repeat your question? I just want to make sure we capture that.
Yeah, I just wanted, so I teach in recreation, sport, and tourism. And one of the modules within the Inclusive by Design class is around communication and marketing, and making that, you know, the services that we provide accessible to everyone. And so that's where I would, you know, after listening to Alyssa, that's where I was thinking some of these materials or the equipment that she looked at could be something that would be usable in a marketing type module, communication and marketing type module. And so I was just throwing that out there to see if anybody else teaches that. I mean, I've got all kinds of stuff, like I said, facility design, accessible equipment that you might have within your either your sport or your rec or your tourist facility. I'm sure I'm a little different than anybody else that's sitting here, but it is something that in our field we need to be able to work with all our stakeholders, because it relates to your health and wellness. And so that's why I'm interested in looking at this and applying for something.
Yeah, this is Kate speaking. Oh, sorry, Alyssa, did you want to? Okay, thank you for repeating that. Really appreciate it. I would say, given what you mentioned about it being a module and thinking about marketing, if you, aside from maybe some of the technologies, assistive technologies that students might encounter or use in their work, if you were even able to think about how would you teach students to create accessible marketing materials for you know, these different activities, different programs they might be doing as they go out into the world, that would definitely be an interesting sort of approach to it. So, you know, focused on the how do they create accessible, you know, press releases or something, or how do they create it? Obviously, this isn't quite my discipline, so apologies if these aren't the right words, but in thinking about the ways that your students will be employed in the future, you know, how do they need to communicate it? How do they need to market what's going on, and make sure that that's accessible and inclusive for anyone who wants to access those services or places, if that makes sense. That I see being a really powerful space. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I'd have to dig. I think we've had one marketing or communication PR grantee in the past, but I can't remember right off the top of my head. And yes, I see Vicky. Vicky's hand is raised, maybe to add on to this as someone who does comms, so, or something separate, but yes, hand it over to you, Vicky.
Thank you, Kate. Yes, this is Vicky Diaz. No, I just want to add that all the elements and concepts of accessibility can be incorporated in your model, Robin, and then you can use some of the media, how to make media accessible, videos and audios, and you can incorporate the needs of people with disabilities across your model. So I think that definitely communications and marketing is more than important for people with disabilities, and specifically for tourism and recreation and sports. Of course, you can incorporate those elements and concepts. And as Judy mentioned, we have a lot of resources in the webpage. You can just go in the Canvas and you can see the concepts, and it is there's a way to apply that those concepts in your model for sure.
Go for it. Thank you, Vicky. Really appreciate that. And I'm seeing a thumbs up from Robin, so I will pass it to Alyssa, whose hand is raised.
Yeah, so I was just going to add on that, Robin, one thing that you might want to potentially consider or at least look at are the WCAG guidelines. It's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Not that your students are going to be designing the web content, but maybe reading through them and distilling down some of the major themes that your students need to look for when content is being created for them, or if they're creating the content themselves, how to make sure that it's accessible to the widest audience possible.
Thank you.
Great questions. Other questions people have at this point? One thing I do want to quickly just mention, Alyssa had reminded me of that when she was sharing about her work. As part of the grant, in addition to the work that you want to do for your class, we have a pre and post survey that we ask you to send to your students, which helps us and you measure growth and learning. We have questions we've been using over time, and there are some in the university's task force who are really helping us kind of understand trends that we're seeing. Basic things, we're happy to talk more about that if you'd like, but we have them already created. We send them to you, and then you're able to do that either at the beginning of the semester, or if it's something you're going to teach just for a short amount of time in the semester, you could do it week 7 of the semester or whatever. So there's a pre and post survey, and then the final report, and I see Alyssa's hand raised, so thank you, Alyssa. Please feel free to fill in there. But the final report is due after you've taught the new curriculum, new materials. So if you're teaching in the fall, for example, sometime in the spring, the report would be due, or if you're teaching spring 2023, the report would be due sometime in the summer. Alyssa might be able to say more from her firsthand experience about it, but we try not to make it be, it's not 70 pages of a report, it's a couple pages. Really so that we can understand, what did you do? What did you think you were going to do? What did you do and how did it go? To help us kind of get a better sense of how people are using these funds and what that looks like. So I will pause there and see if Alyssa is willing to, or what you're interested in sharing.
Hi, it's Alyssa. Yes, the final reporting was not onerous at all. It was very manageable. I was able to complete it in a couple of hours. What I wanted to originally comment on is the helpfulness of the pre and post survey. It was one thing that was taken off of my plate. And so Teach Access was very proactive about contacting my students to take the survey, and also in informing me of the results. So after the pre-survey was done, I was informed of the results. Was I get the results then? I can't remember. But in either event, I did get the results of the pre and the post survey, and then I could use and analyze those results. And some analysis was included in the reporting of the survey responses. And so I could just, migrate that in and incorporate it into my final report. So those surveys were incredibly helpful because I didn't have to make them up or administrate them. Teach Access did that all for me. So that was incredibly helpful.
Thanks, Alyssa. This is Kate. One point of clarity. We don't actually directly email the students. We create the survey and send it to you as faculty, and then you share it with your students. So we aren't contacting your students directly. But yeah.
That's a great point. It's been a while. The memory fades.
Totally fair.
So
but everything else is true. Yeah.
Yes,
Everything else is true. We have it created. We create that individual link for each grantee, and then give that to you as the faculty member. It is an anonymous survey. So that's also something we get asked afterwards. Faculty will be like, well, I'm doing this for credit or extra credit or whatever it is. Can you tell me what students have done it? We're like, we can't, because we don't have that information and don't want that information, frankly. So it is something that you administer at the time that's right. We just make sure hey, it's time for the pre and the post. So yeah. Yeah, Alyssa.
It's Alyssa, just to contribute. I did offer it as a bonus opportunity to my students, and basically I just asked them to take a little snippet of their name on the Google form. I didn't want to ask for their answers, but just some proof that they took the survey to receive credit.
And just in case anyone missed it, Maria Jose asked, some colleagues in my university are asking me where they can get the recording. That's in the chat. And Judy said that it will be uploaded to Canvas. And yes, so as Judy laid out in the beginning, doing that community link, I don't think those are the right words, but registering for the Canvas site, you'll be able to get it that way. So absolutely encourage your colleagues there. Thanks, Maria Jose.
Thank you.
Any other questions we can answer for anyone?
I was just wondering, I was looking at the application form and I see it's like a form, I think it's a Google form that you have to complete several steps. And I was wondering what type of, if it's kind of an essay or statement, or it's something that you are gonna guide us in the specific questions about the grant, or it's more like an open proposal?
That's a great question. It's more open.
Okay.
I'll see Rob maybe, or Cindy, if or Judy, anyone, if you want to add any more sort of context around that, but it is meant to be pretty open from the understanding of, we understand that all of your disciplines are different. I mean, I'm super fascinated by what Robin shared today, where she's coming from, other disciplinary spaces, the ways that you're teaching, modalities has come up. So while it does feel very open, that is a little bit intentional, just because we want it to be driven by what are you doing in your class? Like, what is going to work for you? Because if we show up and we're like, here you go, this is what you should teach about this, we know that it won't go over very well, or might not work. So it's meant to be a little looser, but maybe Rob or Judy or Cindy, does that sound fair to what everyone's talking about in the task force as well?
Thank you.
That is very accurate of the streamlinedness of the process, where we'll ask you, what class are you thinking of adding this module or project or whatever into it? And then we'll ask for a brief summary of your proposed element that you're adding, how you might evaluate that. And so the application is 6 steps that you're walking through, 6 pages to the application, but really just general writing of what are you thinking about doing, and how does this align with accessibility, and how are you going to assess and evaluate that?
Yeah, I'll echo that. It really, we're very excited to see your proposals. All of you know your disciplines far better than each of us and whatever our disciplines are. And so your stuff. And that's why we rely on you as the content experts here to figure out what you think would work in the classes that you teach.
Okay, thank you. Sounds good.
It's a great question, thank you. And there is a message in here from Leslie in the chat. There's a complete list of questions asked for this year and previous years. We just kind of keep it going. On the application, it's in the Faculty Grants website under the application questions section. So you can actually, I see what you're saying. It's the list of questions that you'll be asked on that. So that can kind of help guide you. And then this question in the chat, I might toss to Judy from Robin about getting back into Canvas. You're muted, Judy.
Let's see, if you already registered for the page, yeah, that's why we were suggesting the bookmark, because it is confusing. But there's a link right back to it. So let me see if I can get that link for you, and I'll come right back.
Mohan, it looks like you raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Hey everyone, thanks for this session. I'm just wondering about the grant. So I think at some point I saw that the grant can be used towards the faculty's summer compensation, right? Do you, as a committee, review committee, have a preference over that, and is there any limitation on those?
Do you mean in terms of if it's used for salary versus something else?
Yes.
No preference. It's really, so Alyssa's, what Alyssa shared about what she did in her class, because the assistive tech can be pricey, as we've heard, that was, in her estimation, I mean, I'm speaking for you now, Alyssa, but the best way to use those funds was to acquire the AT needed for what she wanted to teach. For other faculty who we've seen maybe aren't, whatever they want to do doesn't require AT or specific types of software. It's more about spending the time to create a new lecture or lecture materials or student project prompts or assignments, etc., which of course is time. And so then that is where we see a lot of people wanting to use summer salary or use it for salary. There have been one or two faculty in the past who've used it to help pay for a grad student assistant. So if there was something specific to what they wanted to do in their class and having a little extra fund available to support a grad student and helping them do that, that's okay too. So it's really open in that way. In terms of the actual disbursement of funds, we do work with your universities. So once awarded, our team gets in touch with your financial or grants administrator, and then it's all worked out that way. So we just say, oh, it's being used as, you know, here's $5,000 to be used as summer salary or whatever. Or if it's to order something, you know, we work with them that way. So
thank you.
Great question. Absolutely, great question. Okay, Judy has found a way to get back to the course. It's in the chat. Looks like there's a step 1 to go to a link and then click login, select Canvas, use the username and password you created, and it will show up on your dashboard. And that URL, yeah, oh, sorry.
And I see
Yeah,
it's,
no, just
it's the free account. I think that's where it gets confusing.
Yeah, don't use your institutional account. And then bookmark it. I learned the hard way.
Great questions. We have just about 10 minutes left of the scheduled hour. We're happy to keep taking questions as you have them. If you have any more specific questions, or maybe you aren't comfortable, don't want to ask those in front of the group, please email us, and Leslie, I'll ask you to drop the email address into the chat. Email us, and one of us on the Teach Access team will get back to you that way. All questions are welcome and encouraged. We do have a lot of them up on the FAQ space, so I might encourage you to start there and see if your question can be answered there, and if not, definitely please reach out to us. Thanks, Leslie. It's facultygrants@teachaccess.org. Any other questions we can answer while we're here?
Hi, could I chime in with a question?
Please.
Sorry, I'm late to the party. I just found out about it, so I really hope I'm not repeating any information here.
No problem.
So what I'm trying to do at Montclair State University in New Jersey is launch an audio description program. Myself and some other faculty who are also on this call have done some work already to teach students the basics about writing audio description, but we're just having a hard time getting campus buy-in, and it's always about the money. So what I want to do if I was to receive such a grant, is kind of create a coordinator position for myself to work with our students who are already learning the basics of writing audio description and producing it, and kind of farm them out around campus and even into the community to make AD for films, museums, dance recitals, you name it. Is that something, is that creating such a, funding a coordinator position like this, is that something that your grants would cover?
It is a phenomenal question, and kudos to you for working through that. That's a lot to do. It's a
Right.
little outside the scope. I wish I could say like, yes, we'll give everyone money to do everything. But we're really focused on these grants being used in classrooms or classroom spaces to teach students. So if you, so if you weren't already teaching those things, and or there are classes that aren't teaching it that you want to be teaching audio description in, that would be the space for it.
That's certainly,
I mean, I know
certainly
that
workable.
yeah, I know that I did mention, like, we have had people use it as salary for grad assistance. Really, though, in service to that course that already exists and creating materials or, you know, pedagogical
Gotcha.
spaces that, you know, that's not a phrase, but trying to create space within a course to teach
And
it where it
exists
hasn't
where-
existed.
so something that, let's say, is even workshop level. So for instance, there's a gallery on our campus who has said that they would love to have someone come in and train their 20 or so student workers how to describe music, you know, art exhibitions. Would developing like a kind of a workshop to go around to different entities on a campus fit, or we're talking about classroom course related materials, which I mean, of course, is feasible too.
Yeah, it's really more the classroom space.
Gotcha.
But one of the pieces around this grant is that we, as one of the questions on the application, and I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but it's something about how might you share what you do on your campus. And we've seen people talk about, oh, I'll present at a brown bag, or I'll present at a faculty meeting or a workshop or something. So there could be space for that, right? Of here's how I'm going to create this stuff and use it in a class, and then also be able to share it in a workshop. I don't know if that's something that would work for you, but yeah, more so what's happening in classes and making sure students are, or making sure that it's where students already are in classes that exist. I know that's not super satisfying as an answer.
No,
but
I think it's something that could be augmented onto the programs that we already have. To, you know, we have students, you know, that are learning, let's say, how to write audio description, but they don't have any hands-on projects. So, you know,
Sure.
perhaps funding like this would underwrite their ability to, you know, live audio describe a theatrical performance on campus or something like that. To buy the gear
That's great.
needed to do all this stuff like that.
Absolutely. That's
I will make a proposal fit. Thank you so much for your insight.
yes, absolutely.
Great. Take care.
Love the creativity. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah.
Excellent questions. I love these questions. Are there others before we take off in a couple minutes? How many people think that they would like to submit one or thinking they want to? Yes, I see one hand from Maria Jose. Would love to see it. Hopefully others. A couple thumbs up I see. Great. Excited about that. Cindy or Rob, would you be willing to kind of highlight some dates for the group? I see some more thumbs up for submitting. As we sign off here.
Yeah, the date, have them pulled up here. So we have they are open through April 15th, and the submission time deadline is 5 p.m. Pacific time. So whatever your time zone is, that will apply for turning this grant in. And then Teach Access will review the grants, and then we will contact folks within a couple of weeks after that to just ask if that course is still going to happen and if you're willing to accept the funds and such. There's all sorts of reasons if you cannot accept, if you're not teaching the course you proposed or whatever. And then on Global Accessibility Awareness Day on May 19th, 2022, we will announce this year's faculty grant awardees on that day. So that's the official announcement day, but if you were to be awarded, you would be contacted like a week before that.
Thank you. And I thank you everyone for attending and making the time. Really appreciate you being here. You've asked some really great questions, so appreciate that. I want to give a special thank you to Cindy, Rob, Judy, and Alyssa, who worked together to put this together and get the information up there. Also to Vicki Diaz, who's part of our Teach Access group. And of course to Leslie as well, who's here from the Teach Access team. Really great to be able to meet with all of you. We hope that you'll all submit something. We're excited to see what you're thinking. And of course, as always, if you do have questions that aren't answered on the site, please do email that facultygrants@teachaccess.org email address, and we will address them there. So with that, thank you everyone.
Thank
and
you.
Have a good rest of your Tuesday.
Likewise.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone.